An Irishman, an Italian, and a redneck walk into a bar. The elderly Irishman slowly limped up to the bar and ordered an Irish whiskey. He sat down at the bar and saw Jesus sitting alone down at the end. He asked the bartender, "Is that Christ down there?" The bartender said yes, so the Irishman said, "Well, get him your finest Irish whiskey on me." Next, a hunchbacked Italian man came in and ambled his way to the bar where he ordered a Chianti. He saw Jesus and asked the bartender, "Is that the Lord down there?" The bartender said yes, so the Italian man said, "Then send him a Chianti on me." A redneck sauntered in and sat down. He ordered a bush and saw Jesus. "Holy! Is that Jesus?" The bartender said yes, so the redneck said, "Well, get him a nice cold beer on me." Jesus finished his drinks and walked over the Irishman. He touched the Irishman's legs and said, "For your kindness you are healed." The Irishman hopped up and danced a jig out the door. Next, he placed his hand on the Italian's back and said, "For your kindness you're healed." The Italian's back straightened up and he stood tall for the first time in his life. He then walked out of the bar proudly. Jesus approached the redneck, but before he could touch him, the redneck held his hands up and said, "Don't touch me, I'm on disability." A man is crawling through the desert, dying of thirst. The desert is blazing hot, and he's desperate for water. He comes upon a traveling merchant. He crawls up to the merchant and says, "Water, please. Water. Water." The merchant says, "I don't have any. I'm a tie salesman. Would you like to buy a tie?" The guy replies, "No. I need water. I'm so thirsty. Water." The merchant says, "Well, I told you I don't have any. But go west about 10 miles or so, and there is a small inn where you can get water." The guy crawls off. A couple of days go by, and the guy comes crawling back to the merchant. He looks even worse than before. The merchant asks, "What's wrong? Didn't they give you water at the inn?" The guy replies, "They wouldn't let me in without a tie." A beautiful princess comes upon a frog in a meadow near her castle. The frog hops into the princess' lap and says, "My lady, one kiss from you, and I will turn back into the dapper, young prince that I once was, and then, my sweet, we can marry and set up housekeeping in yon castle with my mother, where you can prepare my meals, clean my clothes, bear my children, and forever be happy doing so." That night, as the princess dines on lightly sautéed frog legs, she chuckles to herself, "I don't think so." Beethoven died. When Beethoven passed away, he was buried in a churchyard. A couple days later, the town drunk was walking through the cemetery and heard some strange noise coming from the area where Beethoven was buried. Terrified, the drunk ran and got the priest to come and listen to it. The priest bent close to the grave and heard some faint, unrecognizable music coming from the grave. Frightened, the priest ran and got the town magistrate. When the magistrate arrived, he bent his ear to the grave, listened for a moment, and said, "Ah, yes, that's Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, being played backwards." He listened a while longer, and said, "There's the Eighth Symphony, and it's backwards, too. Most puzzling." So the magistrate kept listening, "There's the Seventh, the Sixth, the Fifth." Suddenly the realization of what was happening dawned on the magistrate. He stood up and announced to the crowd that had gathered in the cemetery, "My fellow citizens, there's nothing to worry about. It's just Beethoven decomposing." 3 women escape from prison, a blonde and 2 brunettes, and to get away from the cops they hide in an abandoned farmhouse. Inside the house, there are 3 sacks that the escapees crawl into when the police search the building. One of the cops sees the sacks and yells, "There are just 3 burlap sacks in here." To which his partner replies, "Then kick them just to be sure it's not them hiding." The officer goes and kicks one with a brunette in it and she yells, "Meow." The officer says, "Oh, it's just a stupid cat in there." So he kicks the one with the other brunette in it and she yells, "Ruff, ruff." The officer says, "Oh, it's just a stupid dog." Then he kicks the sack with the blonde in it and she yells, "Potatoes." At a wine merchant's warehouse, the regular taster died, and the director started looking for a new one to hire. A drone with a ragged diary look came to apply for the position. The director wondered how to send him away. They gave him a glass to drink. The old drone tried it and said, "It's a muscat 3 years old, grown on a northern SL, matured in steel containers. Low grade but acceptable." "That's correct," said the boss. "Another glass, please." "It's a Cabernet, 8 years old, Southwestern SL, oak barrels, matured at 8 degrees. Requires 3 more years for finest results." "Absolutely correct." "A third glass." "It's a Pinot Blanc champagne, high grade and exclusive," said the drone. The director was astonished and winked at his secretary to suggest something. She left the room and came back in with a glass of urine. The alcoholic tried it. "It's a blonde, 26 years old, 3 months pregnant, and if I don't get the job, I'll name the father." Two blondes, Jane and Sarah, were deep in a philosophical argument. "Since you're so D&D smart," Sarah says, "answer this question: why is it that when a slice of buttered bread falls to the ground, it's bound to fall on the buttered side?" Jane snorts, "It doesn't always land on the buttered side." "Here, I'll prove it." She gets out the loaf of bread from the cupboard. Out comes the butter from the fridge. She generously butters the bread. Then she drops it. Butter's side up. "Ha! Ha! See? You think you're so smart. You just buttered the wrong side of the bread." My grandfather was a county sheriff in the late 60s. He told me a story about a man he pulled over for running a stop sign. When confronted, the man said, "Well, I slowed down, what's the difference?" So, my grandfather pulled the man out of his car and began beating him in the head with his nightstick. After a 20 or so good, solid whacks, he asked the man, "Now, do you want me to stop or just slow down?" One day a man, who had been stranded on a desert island for over 10 years, sees an unusual speck on the horizon. "It's certainly not a ship," he thinks to himself. As the speck gets closer and closer, he begins to rule out the possibilities of a small boat, then even a raft. Suddenly, emerging from the surf, comes a drop-dead gorgeous blonde woman wearing a wetsuit and scuba gear. She approaches the stunned guy and says, "Tell me, how long has it been since you've had a cigarette?" 10 years, replies the stunned man. With that she reaches over and unzips a waterproof pocket on her left sleeve and pulls out a pack of cigarettes. He takes one, lights it, takes a long drag and says, "Man, oh man. Is that good?" "And how long has it been since you've had a sip of bourbon?" she asks him. Trembling, the castaway replies, 10 years. She reaches over, unzips her right sleeve, pulls out a flask and hands it to him. He opens the flask, takes a long swig and says, "Wow, that's absolutely fantastic." At this point she starts slowly unzipping the long zipper that runs down the front of her wetsuit, looks at the man seductively, and asks, "And how long has it been since you've had some real fun?" With tears in his eyes, the guy falls to his knees and sobs, "Oh. Don't tell me you've got a laptop?" Hey there, I put a lot effort into making these videos, so please subscribe for more jokes and stay happy, thank you.